Forget everything you thought you knew about Randall Thor. This video isn't about his power or his destiny. It's about the man beneath the legend, the hidden motivations, the trauma, and the profound changes that forged him. Prepare to see the Dragon Reborn through a completely new lens, exposing the true complexity of his character. You heard the tales, the farmboy from Emond's Field, who became the savior of the world, the wielder of Saidin, who purged its corruption, the man who stood against the Dark One and won. But those tales skipped the cracks in the legend, the nights he cried himself to sleep, the times he begged to be ordinary, the moments he feared he'd become the very monster he fought. Randall Thor was never just the Dragon Reborn. He was a boy who loved his father's farm, who hated the sound of Trolloc howls, who once thought the greatest joy in life was sharing a bowl of stew with Mat and Perrin after a day of herding sheep. The legend erases that boy, but he is the key to understanding the man. To see Rand clearly, we must start not with his destiny, but with his fear. Fear of losing himself, fear of hurting the ones he loved, fear that the prophecy would turn him into something unrecognizable. Let's begin in Emond's Field, in the quiet before the storm. In the eye of the world, Rand is 20 years old, tall and lanky, with a habit of running his hand through his dark hair when he's nervous. He doesn't dream of grand adventures. He dreams of marrying Egwene, back when their love was soft and untested, of taking over Tam's farm, of never straying farther than the westward. When Moiraine arrives and tells him he's Taverven, that he's bound to change the world, he laughs. "I'm just a farmer," he says, and he means it. The first crack in that simplicity comes when Trollocs attack Emond's Field, burning homes and killing villagers. Rand grabs a sword, not because he's brave, but because he sees Tam lying wounded in the dirt, and he can't bear to do nothing. He swings the sword and kills a Trolloc, and afterward he retches in the bushes. "I didn't want to do that," he tells Moiraine, his voice shaking. "I just had to." That moment is the first of many where Rand acts not out of heroism, but out of necessity, a pattern that will define his entire journey. He doesn't choose to leave Emond's Field, he's forced to, because the Dark One's minions are hunting him. He doesn't choose to channel Saidin, he does it to save Mat from the Shadar Logoth dagger, and the experience terrifies him. "It felt like fire in my veins," he later admits to Perrin, "like it was trying to eat me from the inside out." The legend says Rand embraced his power, but the truth is he ran from it for years. He avoided channeling whenever possible, even when it meant putting himself in danger, because he feared what it would do to him. He'd heard the stories of male channelers, of how the taint drove them mad, of how they destroyed villages and killed their own families. He didn't want to be that man. He wanted to be the boy from the farm. That fear deepens into trauma as his journey unfolds. Trauma isn't just the big moments, the battles, the near-death experiences. It's the small, sharp things that chip away at a person. It's the way Tam looks at him differently after he channels Saidin for the first time, like he's seeing a stranger. It's the night he spends in the waste, listening to Avienda talk about the aiel who died protecting him and realizing that people are dying because of him. It's the moment in the fires of heaven when he accidentally hurts egwene while channeling, when he sees the fear in her eyes and he vows never to let that happen again. "I'd rather die than hurt you," he tells her, and it's not a hero's line. It's a promise from a man who's terrified of his own hands. The worst trauma comes from the taint itself, from the voice of Luz Therin Telamon in his head. At first, Rand thinks he's going mad. He hears Luz Therin screaming about Ilyena, about the breaking, about the guilt of killing his own wife. He locks himself in rooms to avoid anyone hearing the voice. He stops sleeping. He even considers killing himself to end the torment. In Lord of Chaos, he sits on a cliff edge, staring at the ocean, and wonders if jumping would be better than becoming a madman. "I can't do this," he whispers to the wind. "I'm not strong enough." The legend says Rand was unbreakable, but the truth is, he broke over and over again. He just kept putting himself back together because he didn't have a choice. What drives him to keep going? It's not the prophecy. It's the people he loves. The legend frames Rand's fight as a quest to save the world, but his hidden motivation is simpler. He wants to protect the ones he cares about. Mat, Perrin, Egwene, Min, Avienda, Elaine, these are the reasons he gets up in the morning. When Mat is dying from the Shadar Logoth dagger, Rand carries him across half the world to find a healer, even though every step makes his own strength fade. When Perrin is captured by White Cloaks, Rand risks his life to rescue him, even though it means delaying his quest to find the Eye of the World. When Egwene is taken by the seanchan, Rand burns with a rage that makes him channel saidin more fiercely than ever, not because of the prophecy, but because Egwene is family. In A Memory of Light, when he stands at Sheol Ghul, facing the Dark One, he doesn't think about saving the world. He thinks about Min's smile, about Avienda's laugh, about Elaine holding their babies. "I fight for them," he tells Lews Therin. "Not for the pattern, not for destiny, for them." That's the hidden Rand, the man who doesn't care about being a hero, who only cares about keeping the people he loves safe. The prophecy is a burden, but they are his anchor. As Rand grows, he undergoes a profound transformation, not into a perfect hero, but into a man who learns to accept his flaws. The turning point comes in Winter's Heart, when he purifies saidin. Most tales frame this as a victory of power, but it's really a victory of self-acceptance. To purify saidin, Rand must face the taint head-on, must look into the darkness and not flinch. He must also face Lews Therin, not as an enemy, but as a part of himself. "We are one," he says to Lews Therin, and for the first time, the voice doesn't scream. It calms. Rand realizes that Lews Therin's guilt is his guilt, that Lews Therin's fear is his fear, that they are two sides of the same coin. Purifying saidin isn't just about cleaning the power, it's about cleaning his own mind, about forgiving himself for the things he's done, the things he's feared. After that, Rand changes. He stops running from his power, but he also stops letting it control him. He uses saidin to heal, not just to fight. He listens to his friends, not just to the prophecy. In The Gathering Storm, when he meets a farmer whose family was killed by Trollocs, he doesn't give a speech about destiny. He sits with the farmer, shares his bread, and cries with him. "I'm sorry," he says. "I wish I could have saved them." That's the mature Rand, the man who doesn't hide his pain, who doesn't pretend to be invincible. He's still scared, still flawed, but he's no longer running from himself. Yet even in his maturity, Rand remains lonely, a loneliness that the legend never mentions. As the Dragon Reborn, no one can truly understand his burden. His friends love him, but they can't feel the weight of the prophecy, can't hear Lews Therin's voice, can't know what it's like to be told you're the only one who can save the world. In A Memory of Light, after the last battle, Rand walks through Emon's field, watching villagers celebrate. Mat is laughing with a group of soldiers. Perrin is holding Fael. Egwene is talking to Aes Sedai. Rand stands apart, smiling, but his eyes are sad. Min comes to him and takes his hand. "You're lonely," she says, and he nods. "I am," he admits, "but it's okay. I chose this." He didn't choose it, not really. The prophecy chose it for him. But he's learned to live with it, to find joy in the small moments, the way Min's hand fits in his, the sound of his children's laughter, the sight of Emon's field thriving. The legend says Rand vanished after the last battle, but the truth is he stayed in his own way. He didn't want a crown or a title. He wanted to watch the world he'd saved heal, to be a father and a husband, to be ordinary again, if only for a little while. So, let's set aside the legend. Let's talk about the man, Rand al'Thor, who loved his father's farm more than any throne. Rand al'Thor, who cried after killing his first Trolloc. Rand al'Thor, who feared his own power more than the Dark One. Rand al'Thor, who fought not for destiny, but for the people he loved. He was not perfect. He made mistakes, terrible ones. He hurt people even when he didn't mean to. He doubted himself, even when the world needed him to be strong. But that's what makes him human. That's what makes him more than a legend. The Dragon Reborn was never about power. It was about resilience, the ability to break and keep going, to fear and still fight, to be ordinary and still do extraordinary things. When you look at Rand al'Thor now, don't see the hero who defeated the Dark One. See the boy from Emond's Field, who just wanted to go home. See the man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but still found time to comfort a grieving farmer. See the husband and father who chose love over legend. That's the Rand the tales forget, the Rand who matters. He didn't ask to be the Dragon Reborn. He didn't want to be, but he was, and in being, he showed us that the greatest strength isn't in power or destiny. It's in being human, in loving, in fearing, in breaking, and in getting back up again. So the next time you hear someone talk about the Dragon Reborn, remember this: he was never a legend. He was a man, and that's the most extraordinary thing about him. The boy from Eamon's Field who just wanted to go home didn't start with a burden. He started with a life so quiet, so rooted in the rhythm of the land, that the very idea of destiny felt like a story Moiraine Damadrid had made up to pass the time. Randall Thor's innocence wasn't naivety, it was the calm of someone who'd never known a world beyond sheep to herd, fences to mend, and evenings spent laughing with Mat and Perrin over mugs of weak ale at the Wine Spring Inn. In the eye of the world we see him at 20, his hands calloused from hauling hay, his mind filled with small, solid dreams, marrying Egwene, the girl with braids he'd teased since childhood, taking over Tam's farm when his father grew old, and never straying farther than the edge of the westward. When Moiraine arrived in Eamon's Field, her blue eyes sharp with the weight of prophecy, and told him he was veren, a soul around whom the pattern wove itself. Rand's first reaction was to laugh. "You must have me mixed up with someone else," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm just Rand. I don't even know what veren means." He didn't want to know. The idea of being chosen felt like a noose, not a gift. He'd watched Tam work from dawn to dusk to keep the farm alive, and he'd learned that the best life was one you built with your hands, not one that was handed to you by an Aes Sedai with a staff and a solemn voice. Even when Moiraine warned of Trollocs, of the Dark One's minions hunting him, Rand clung to his doubt. Trollocs are just stories, he told Perrin one night, sitting by the fire. Stories to make kids behave. He was wrong, of course. But in that moment, his disbelief was a shield, a way to hold onto the innocence of a life where the only danger was a storm ruining the crops. That shield shattered the night the Trollocs came. It was the first time Rand encountered the supernatural, and it didn't feel like a destiny. It felt like a nightmare. The howls cut through the dark, sharp and inhuman, and then the fires started, the blacksmith's shop going up in flames, the Wine Spring Inn's roof collapsing, villagers screaming as they ran. Rand found Tam lying in the dirt, a Trolloc's axe buried in his side, and something in him snapped. He grabbed a sword from a dead guard, heavy, unfamiliar, nothing like the tools he used on the farm, and swung it. The blade sank into a Trolloc's neck, and warm blood sprayed across his face. He didn't feel brave. He didn't feel brave. He felt sick. Later, as he knelt beside Tam, pressing a rag to his father's wound, Moiraine knelt beside him. "This is just the beginning," she said. "The Dark One wants you dead because you are the Dragon Reborn." Rand stared at her, his hands shaking. "The Dragon Reborn," he repeated, the words tasting like ash. "The one who broke the world? That's not me." But the evidence was there, the Trollocs, the sword in his hand, Tam's blood on his clothes. The weight of the prophecy hit him then, not as a story, but as a physical thing, heavy, cold, pressing down on his chest until he could barely breathe. A few days later, when Mat was struck down by the Shadar Logoth dagger, his body wasting away, Rand was forced to channel saidin for the first time. He didn't want to. He didn't want to. He'd heard the tales of male channelers, of how the taint turned them mad, of how they killed their own families. But Mat was dying, and Rand couldn't let that happen. He reached for the power, and it hit him like a furnace fire in his veins, a roar in his head, so powerful he thought it would tear him apart. He healed Mat, but afterward he collapsed, vomiting, and told Perrin, "I never want to feel that again. It's not right. It's wrong." That day, he learned that destiny doesn't ask for permission. It takes what it wants, and you're left holding the pieces. By the time Rand left Eamon's Field, his innocence was gone. Burned away by Trolloc fires, buried under the weight of prophecy, shattered by the taste of saidin. The boy who dreamed of herding sheep and marrying Egwene couldn't go back, not even if he wanted to. The farm felt foreign when he visited it one last time, the barn empty, the fields overgrown, the house silent. He ran his hand along the fence he'd mended the summer before, and for a moment he wanted to cry, to beg the pattern to let him stay, to be ordinary. But he couldn't. The Trollocs would come back, and this time they'd kill everyone if he didn't run. The contrast between his past and present was stark, a knife twist in his chest. He'd once worried about rain ruining the wheat. Now he worried about Trollocs and Forsaken and the taint in Saidin. He'd once laughed with Egwene about their future. Now they stood apart, both knowing their paths had split. She to the White Tower, he to a destiny he didn't understand. Even his relationship with Tam changed. When Tam woke up, weak but alive, he looked at Rand not as his son, but as a stranger. "You're not the boy I raised," Tam said, his voice soft. "I don't know who you are anymore." Rand didn't argue. He didn't know either. He was no longer the farm boy from Emond's Field. He was something else, something burdened, something scared, something that carried the weight of the world in his hands. As he walked away from the farm, toward a future he didn't want, he looked back one last time. The sun was rising over the westward, painting the sky pink and gold, and for a second it looked like the Emond's Field he'd loved. But it wasn't. That Emond's Field was gone, along with the boy who'd lived there. Randall Thor's journey from innocence to burden wasn't a choice. It was a theft of his dreams, his peace, his sense of self. He didn't ask to be the Dragon Reborn. He didn't ask to fight Trollocs or channel Saidin or hear the voice of a madman in his head. But the pattern doesn't care about what you ask for. It cares about what you must become. And for Rand, becoming the Dragon Reborn meant leaving behind the boy he was and carrying the man he had to be, scared, broken, but still standing. The road ahead was long, and it would only get harder. But in that loss of innocence, in that first taste of burden, Rand learned something crucial. He wasn't alone. Mat and Perrin were with him, Egwene was with him, even Moiraine, in her own solemn way, was with him. They were all leaving their old lives behind, all carrying their own burdens. And for a moment, as they walked toward the horizon, Rand felt a flicker of something, not quite hope, just a quiet resolve. He might not be the farm boy anymore, but he'd fight. He'd fight for Tam, for Egwene, for the Emond's Field he'd lost. He'd fight because he had to. Because that's what you do when innocence is taken from you. You don't give up. You carry the burden, and you keep going. The road away from Emond's Field didn't just take Randall Thor from his farm, it dragged him into a shadow that grew darker with every step. The shadow of Luz Therin Telamon, the former Dragon Reborn, whose memories and guilt clung to him like a second skin. At first the voice was faint, a whisper in the back of his head, muttering about Ilyena, about the breaking, about a guilt so heavy it could crush a man. In Lord of Chaos, it grew louder until Rand could no longer tell where his thoughts ended and Luz Therin's began. He'd be talking to Min, planning their next move, and suddenly he'd hear, "She'll leave you, just like Ilyena left me," or he'd be channeling Saidin to mend a broken bridge, and the voice would scream, "You'll break it again. You'll break everything." It wasn't just a hallucination, it was a theft of self. Rand began to question his own choices. Was it his idea to trust the aiel or Luz Therin's? Did he fear the taint, or was he echoing Luz Therin's terror of madness? One night, in a tent in the waste, he grabbed a dagger and pressed it to his wrist, half convinced that killing himself would silence the voice. Min stopped him, her hands wrapping around his, and said, "That's not you. That's him. That's him. Fight it." But fighting felt impossible. Luz Therin was in his bones, in his blood, in the way he channeled Saidin, raw, desperate, haunted. The internal struggle wasn't just about sanity, it was about identity. Rand feared he'd ceased to be Randall Thor, the farm boy from Emond's Field, and become nothing but a vessel for Luz Therin's ghost. As the voice grew stronger, Rand grew harder. The boy who'd cried after killing his first Trolloc vanished, replaced by a man who calculated losses like a general, who made choices that sent good people to their deaths, who believed cruelty was a necessary weapon in the fight against the Dark One. In the gathering storm, he faced a band of Dark Friends who'd captured a village of farmers, threatening to kill one every hour until he surrendered. Instead of negotiating, Rand channeled Saidin and brought the village's walls crashing down, burying the Dark Friends and 3 innocent farmers under rubble. Afterward, Min asked him if he was sorry. He stared at his hands, still dusted with stone, and said, "Regret doesn't save lives. The Dark One won't hesitate to kill 1,000 villages to get to me. I can't afford to hesitate either." It was a lie, he told himself as much as her. He wasn't just being strategic, he was numbing himself. The more he hurt others, the less he felt his own pain. The less he heard Luz Theren's voice, the less he grieved for the innocence he'd lost. Another time, he ordered Perrin to lead a diversionary attack on a forsaken stronghold, knowing half of Perrin's men would die. Perrin argued, begging him to find another way, but Rand refused. "The last battle is coming," he said, his voice cold. "We don't get to choose who lives." He didn't meet Perrin's eyes. He couldn't. He knew the boy from Emond's Field would have apologized, would have found a way to fight without sacrificing so many. But that boy was gone. The Dragon Reborn didn't have the luxury of mercy. The cost of that harshness was loneliness, deep, sharp, and inescapable. Rand pushed away the people who loved him, not because he wanted to, but because he feared he'd hurt them. He stopped sharing his tent with Min, sleeping alone in the cold, because he was terrified Luz Theren's madness would make him lash out in his sleep. He avoided Egwene, even when she begged to talk about the White Tower's plans, because he couldn't bear to see the disappointment in her eyes, the way she looked at him like he was a stranger. He even distanced himself from Perrin and Mat, the friends he'd grown up with, because their laughter felt like a reminder of a life he couldn't have anymore. Once, in Camelin, Mat tried to drag him to a tavern for a mug of ale, just like old times. Rand refused, saying he had work to do. Mat stared at him and said, "You're not the Rand I knew." The old Rand would have skipped work for a drink, for a friend. Rand turned away. He didn't trust himself to speak. He was afraid he'd cry or scream, or admit that he missed the old Rand too. The loneliness wasn't just about being alone, it was about being unknowable. No one could understand the weight of Luz Theren's voice, the fear of becoming a monster, the guilt of every life he'd sacrificed. Even Min, who could see his future in her visions, couldn't see the shadow he carried. She saw the hero who'd defeat the Dark One, not the man who stayed up at night, whispering apologies to the ghosts of the farmers he'd buried. The dragon's shadow wasn't just the Dark One's influence or the weight of prophecy. It was the part of Rand that he hated, the part that heard Luz Theren's voice, that chose cruelty over mercy, that pushed away love to avoid pain. He carried it with him everywhere, a cloak woven from guilt and fear, until it felt like a second skin. There were moments when he thought he might drown in it, moments when he wondered if the Dark One had already won, if the shadow had consumed him entirely. But even in those dark moments, a flicker of the old Rand remained, the boy who'd loved his farm, who'd cried for his friends, who'd once believed in mercy. It was that flicker that kept him going. Not the prophecy, not the power of saidin, but the memory of who he'd been. He didn't know if he'd ever get that boy back. He didn't know if he'd ever be free of Luz Theren's shadow. But he knew he had to keep fighting for the people he loved, for the world he'd sworn to save, and for the small, stubborn part of himself that still believed in hope. The shadow of Luz Theren and the weight of isolation didn't just harden Rand. They forged in him a messiah complex that became both armor and cage, a belief so unwavering it blinded him to the line between savior and tyrant. He stopped seeing himself as Randall Thor, the farm boy who'd loved his father's stew, and started seeing only the Dragon Reborn, the one prophesied to bind what is broken, the only soul who could stand against the Dark One. This belief wasn't arrogance, it was terror. If he faltered, if he let anyone else share the burden, the world would burn. In the fires of heaven, Egwene begged him to let the Aes Sedai help, to let her link with him to purify saidin faster. He refused, his voice sharp with a fear he couldn't hide. "This is my fate, Egwene, not yours. If I fail, it's my soul that burns, not yours." He didn't trust anyone else to carry the weight, not even the friend he'd grown up with. When Min tried to remind him that prophecies were just words, that he didn't have to do it alone, he turned away. "You don't understand," he said. "They're counting on me. All of them. All of them. I can't let them down." This unwavering belief became his identity. To doubt his role was to doubt his reason for existing. And in the chaos of war, that doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford. He clung to the prophecy like a lifeline, even as it pulled him further from the people who loved him. That belief spilled into a need to control, to shape the world into a version that could survive the last battle, even if it meant breaking it first. Rand stopped asking for advice. He gave orders. He stopped listening to allies. He dictated terms. In Lord of Chaos, he took control of Caemlyn after Elaine's father died, ignoring the city's noble houses who begged for a say in governance. He imposed strict laws, curfews, grain rationing, mandatory military service for all men over 16. When a group of nobles protested, arguing the laws would starve their people, Rand channeled saidin to destroy their manners, warning, "Anyone who stands in the way of saving the world will be crushed." The consequences were immediate. Riots broke out in the streets. Farmers refused to send grain to the city, and even Elaine, who loved him, accused him of becoming a tyrant. "This isn't saving Caemlyn," she said. "This is conquering it." He didn't care. He told himself the chaos was temporary, that the nobles would thank him when the Dark One was defeated. But deep down he knew he was acting out of fear, not strategy. If he couldn't control Caemlyn, how could he control the Dark One? He tried to exert the same control over the aiel, ordering their clans to merge into a single army, ignoring their centuries-old traditions of independence. When a sept leader refused to comply, Rand had him publicly shamed, a move that made even Abienda, who'd always stood by him, flinch. "You're not leading them," she said. "You're breaking them." The isolation grew worse. Perrin stopped visiting, Mat avoided his tents, and even Luz Therin's voice mocked him. "You'll end up like me, Rand. Alone, broken." Yet for all his rigidity, for all his control, Rand's Messiah complex couldn't extinguish the flickers of compassion that still lived in the Farmboy beneath the legend. These moments didn't come when he was heaving orders or channeling saidin. They came when he let his guard down, when he forgot he was the Dragon Reborn and remembered he was human. In the gathering storm, he wandered the streets of a small village in Andor, its homes destroyed by a Trolloc raid. An old woman sat in the rubble, clutching a doll that belonged to her dead granddaughter. Rand didn't give her a speech about destiny or victory. He knelt beside her, took off his cloak, and wrapped it around her shoulders. He helped her dig through the ruins to find her granddaughter's body, and he buried the child with his own hands. When she thanked him, he whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't save her." It was a far cry from the man who'd buried Dart friends and farmers alike under Caemlyn's walls. Another moment came during the last battle, in A Memory of Light. A young soldier, no older than 17, lay dying in the mud, his leg crushed by a Trolloc's club. Rand knelt beside him, and the boy begged to see his mother one last time. Rand closed his eyes, channeled saidin gently, not to fight, but to ease the boy's pain, and held his hand until he died. Afterward, Min found him sitting in the mud, his face streaked with tears. "I can't save them all," he said, his voice breaking. "I keep trying, but I can't." It was the first time he'd admitted he wasn't perfect, that he couldn't control everything. These moments were his redemption. They reminded him that being a savior wasn't about controlling the world. It was about caring for the people in it. Rand's Messiah complex was never just about pride. It was about fear. The fear of failing, the fear of being inadequate, the fear that the boy from Emond's Field wasn't strong enough to save anyone. He tried to be a god because he was terrified of being human. But the true strength he found wasn't in his unwavering belief or his control. It was in his compassion, in his willingness to admit he was wrong, in his ability to cry for the people he couldn't save. By the time he stood at Sheol Ghul, facing the Dark One, he'd let go of the need to control. He didn't stand alone. Egwene was there with the Aes Sedai, Perrin with the wolves, Mat with his army, Min with her hand in his. He didn't channel saidin like a weapon of rage. He channeled it like a shield, protecting the people he loved. "I'm not the only one saving the world," he told the Dark One. "We are." In that moment, the Messiah complex faded. The Dragon Reborn was still there, but so was Rand al'Thor. The farm boy, the friend, the man who cared more about the people he loved than the prophecy that defined him. That's the truth of Rand's journey. His Messiah complex was a shadow, but his compassion was the light. He didn't save the world because he believed he was the only one who could. He saved it because he loved it, because he loved the old woman in the rubble, the dying soldier, the friends who'd stood by him even when he pushed them away. The prophecy didn't make him a hero. His humanity did. And in the end, that's what set him apart from Luz Therin, from the Dark One, from every other force that tried to break him. He wasn't a messiah. He was just a man, flawed, scared, but willing to keep going, even when the weight of the world felt too heavy. And that was more than enough. The weight of being the Dragon Reborn had always felt like chains, but by the time Rand climbed the slopes of Dragonmount, his boots slipping on cold stone, his lungs burning from the thin air, those chains had tightened until he could barely breathe. He'd come to the mountain not to fight, but to surrender. The last battle loomed, the Dark One's shadow spreading across the world, and he was tired. Tired of carrying the weight alone, tired of hurting the people he loved, tired of the voice in his head that still whispered Luz Therin's guilt. In a memory of light, he collapses against a boulder, his hands scraping the rock as he stares at the clouds. For a moment he considers letting the Dark One win. What was the point of saving a world that demanded so much suffering? What was the point of being the Dragon Reborn, if it turned him into a monster who buried farmers under rubble and pushed his friends away? He closes his eyes, and the memories flood in, Tam lying wounded in Emond's field, Mat wasting away from the Shadar Logoth dagger, the 3 farmers he killed in Caemlyn. "I'm not saving anyone," he whispers to the wind. "I'm just destroying things." This is the depths of his despair. The moment when the chains feel unbreakable, when even the prophecy feels like a cruel joke. But then, in the silence, he hears a voice, not Luz Therin's, but Min's. "You're not alone," she'd said to him once, her fingers brushing his cheek. "I see you, Rand. All of you." And then Egwene's. "The farm boy I grew up with isn't gone. He's just hiding." And Tam's, soft but steady, strength isn't about carrying it alone. It's about letting others help. These voices cut through the despair, and for the first time in years he lets himself cry, not the quiet, ashamed tears of a man who fears weakness, but the loud, ragged sobs of someone finally letting go. This is his emotional breakthrough. He doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't have to carry the world alone. The chains he'd felt weren't just from prophecy. They were from his own fear of being human. As the tears fade, Rand stands, and for the first time, he truly hears Luz Therin's voice, not as an enemy, but as a part of himself. "We've been fighting each other," the voice says, softer now, no longer screaming. "But we're the same. You're not just Rand al'Thor, you're me. And I'm you." Rand doesn't flinch. He doesn't try to silence the voice. Instead, he nods. "I know," he says. In that moment, the wall between them crumbles. He feels Luz Therin's love for Ilyena, his guilt over the breaking, his fear of failing the world, and he realizes those feelings are his own. He's not just carrying Luz Therin's memories, he's carrying the same desire to protect, the same fear of breaking what he's trying to save. And in that realization, he understands the truth about power. It's not about control, it's about understanding. Understanding himself, understanding others, understanding that the one power and the world itself can't be forced into submission. For years he'd channeled saidin like a weapon, trying to bend it to his will, trying to bend the world to his will. But now he closes his eyes and reaches for the power differently. He doesn't grab it. He listens to it, the hum of fire and earth, the steady pulse of spirit, and lets it flow through him, not as a force to command, but as a force to connect. He feels the mountain beneath his feet, the wind in the sky, the distant heartbeat of Min in Caemlyn, and he understands power is about being part of something larger, not standing above it. This is the lesson he'd missed for so long, the lesson Luz Therin had never learned. Control had broken Luz Therin. It had almost broken Rand, but understanding, that was the key to breaking the chains. With that understanding, Rand begins to integrate the parts of himself he'd spent years rejecting. The farm boy who loved his father's farm, the Dragon Reborn who carried the prophecy, the man who bore Luz Therin's memories. He stopped seeing these as separate, warring selves. He sees them as threads in a single weave, each necessary, each part of who he is. He walks down Dragonmount, not as a man burdened by destiny, but as a man who has made peace with it. When he reaches the base of the mountain, he finds Min waiting for him, her eyes red from crying. He doesn't stand apart from her. He pulls her into his arms, and for the first time in months, he doesn't fear hurting her. "I'm sorry," he says, his face buried in her hair. "I'm sorry I pushed you away." She holds him tighter. "I knew you'd come back," she says. From that moment, his philosophy shifts. He no longer sees leadership as a solo mission. He seeks out Egwene, not to give orders, but to ask for her advice on uniting the Aes Sedai. He finds Perrin and Mat, and he apologizes for the times he'd sacrificed their men without hesitation. "We fight together," he tells them. "All of us. No more secrets. No more solo plays." When the time comes to march to Sheol Ghul, he doesn't ride at the front of the army alone. He rides beside Min, Egwene, Perrin, and Mat, shoulder to shoulder, not above them. He channeled saidin not to destroy, but to protect. He weaves shields around his friends. He heals the wounded. He even works with Aes Sedai to link their powers, saidin and saidar together, into a force stronger than any he could wield alone. Breaking the chains wasn't about escaping his destiny. It was about embracing it on his own terms, no longer as a prisoner of the prophecy, but as a partner to the people he loved. Randor Thor didn't become a better hero on Dragonmount. He became a better man. He stopped trying to be the Messiah the world expected and started being the man he was, flawed, compassionate, and finally willing to let others carry the burden with him. When he stands at Sheol Ghul, facing the Dark One, he doesn't do it as the Dragon Reborn alone. He does it as Rand, the Farmboy, the friend, the husband, who has learned that the greatest power isn't in control, but in connection. The Dark One sneers at him, saying he's still just a boy. Rand smiles. "But I'm not just a boy," he says. "I'm all of us," and in that moment, the Dark One realizes he's already lost. Because you can't defeat a man who has broken his chains and found his strength in the people who love him. The Rand who stood at the edge of Sheol Ghul after breaking his chains was not the same man who'd climbed Dragonmount in despair. He was enlightened, his eyes no longer sharp with fear or anger, but soft with wisdom, his posture steady with a peace that had eluded him for years. This was not a hero driven by prophecy, but a man rooted in purpose, to mend the pattern, to protect the people he loved, and to ensure the world would never again bear the scars of division or fear. In a memory of light, when he faced the Dark One for the final time, he did not channel saidin with rage. He wove it with calm threads of fire and earth and spirit, interlaced with the saidar of Egwene and Nynaeve, a harmony of the one power's two halves. "You think power is about destruction," Rand said, his voice steady as stone. "But it's about creation, about balance." The Dark One sneered, calling him a fool for trusting others, but Rand only smiled. He'd learned the truth on Dragonmount. Power without understanding was empty, and purpose without compassion was meaningless. After the battle, when the world lay broken but breathing, Rand did not claim a crown or demand praise. He walked the ruined villages of Andor, his hands calloused from hauling wood and stacking stone, helping farmers rebuild homes he'd once seen burned to ash. He sat with children who'd lost their parents, telling them stories of Emon's field of sheep and hayrides and the taste of Tam's stew, until their tears turned to smiles. When Elaine asked him to rule Caemlyn with her, he shook his head. "You're the right leader," he said. "I've never wanted a throne. I just wanted people to be safe." This was the enlightened Rand, a man who'd once craved control, now content to serve, a man who'd once feared his own power, now using it to lift others up. His ultimate sacrifice was not a grand death on the battlefield, but a quiet choice to let go, to give up the peace he'd finally found so the world could keep its balance. After the last battle, Rand spent months with Min, Avienda, and Elaine, savoring the small joys he'd missed for years, holding Elaine's babies, watching Avienda teach Aiel children to track, sitting with Min under the stars. But he knew the pattern needed more from him. The Dark One's touch had left a faint crack in the world, a vulnerability that only the Dragon Reborn could seal, not with power, but with his own presence. In a quiet moment by the Winespring Inn, he told Min he had to leave. "I won't be gone forever," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I have to make sure the darkness doesn't come back. For them." She didn't beg him to stay. She knew his purpose was larger than their love, just as he knew her love would keep him anchored. His sacrifice was not about dying. It was about choosing duty over desire, about ensuring the world he'd saved could thrive without him. He left at dawn, walking alone toward the westward, but he did not vanish. Farmers reported seeing a man with dark hair and calm eyes helping mend fences. Aiel children spoke of a stranger who taught them to listen to the wind. Young wolf brothers whispered of a mentor who showed them how to control their instincts without fear. Rand became a legend, not as a warrior, but as a guardian. A quiet presence watching over the world, a reminder that heroism lies in service, not glory. The impact of his journey rippled across the world, shaping a post-last battle era defined by balance and hope. The Two Rivers, once a small village on the edge of the world, became a haven for those seeking peace. Its farms thriving, its blacksmith shops busy, its streets filled with the laughter of children who'd never known Trolloc raids. The White Tower, once divided by rigid rules and fear of male channelers, reformed under Egwene's leadership, welcoming male channelers like Loghain and teaching young Aes Sedai that Saidar and Saidin were partners, not enemies. Caemlyn flourished under Elaine's rule, its laws fair, its people prosperous, a testament to Rand's belief that leadership should serve the many, not the few. Even the aiel, once a nomadic warrior people, began to settle, planting crops and building schools, their culture evolving but not fading. Another echo of Rand's lesson that change and tradition could coexist. His friends carried his legacy forward. Perrin turned the Two Rivers into a beacon of stability. Mat used his wit to broker peace between warring nations. Egwene united the Aes Sedai into a force for good. But the greatest legacy was not in the world's changes. It was in the people he'd touched. A farmer in Andor taught his son to help neighbors, saying, "The Dragon Reborn didn't save us to be selfish." A young wolf brother in Caerhien refused to hide his golden eyes, saying, "Rand showed me it's not a curse, it's a gift." Reflecting on Rand's evolution, the lessons are clear. Power is not about control, but about understanding. Loneliness is not a burden of destiny, but a choice we can unmake, and even the deepest darkness can be overcome with compassion. He began as a naive farm boy, terrified of his own shadow, became a man consumed by fear and pride, and emerged as a leader who found strength in vulnerability. His journey teaches us that redemption is not about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn, to apologize, to let others in. The Rand who left for the westward was not the Dragon Reborn first. He was Rand al'Thor, the boy who loved his father's farm, the friend who'd fought to save his family, the man who'd learned that the greatest power of all was his humanity. In the end, Rand's legacy is not in the prophecies or the battles. It's in the way he made the world believe in hope again. It's in the Two Rivers' thriving fields, in the Aes Sedai's open doors, in the laughter of children who never have to run from Trollocs. It's in the lesson he taught us all, that even when destiny weighs heavy, even when the world feels broken, we are never truly alone. We just have to be willing to break our own chains and walk together.